Testing. Great. Good afternoon and welcome. All right, I see some persons still coming in. All right. I want to say that seats are available up front. I know that we don't like to sit up front, but there are seats available up front. Okay. So we will now begin formally today's stakeholder consultation. I'd like to formally acknowledge Director Michael Hyde, a member of SSB's board, along with Mr. Jerome Palmer, SSB's CEO, members of the Executive Management Committee, and the Communications and PR team. It is a pleasure to have you here as we gather for this important stakeholder consultation hosted by the Social Security Board. At SSB, our mission guides everything we do. We deliver an innovative, resilient, people-centered, and sustainable social insurance program that protects against vulnerabilities from the womb to the tomb. Our purpose is equally clear: to be a beacon of hope that improves the quality of life in Belize. To live out that mission and purpose, we lead with strategy. Our work is anchored in 4 strategic priority areas: good governance, scheme modernization, operational excellence, and fund sustainability. These priorities shape the decisions we make, the services we provide, and the way we plan for the future. One of the most essential pillars of good governance is engagement, ensuring that the people we serve are informed, included, and heard. That is why consultations like today's are essential. They allow us to share performance updates, explain the direction of the fund, and discuss upcoming initiatives such as the My Social Security portal, proposed legislative reforms, and invite your perspectives on issues that directly impact employers, workers, and communities across Belize. Our goal this afternoon is simple: to educate, to inform, and to engage you, our valued stakeholders, as we continue to govern and safeguard the Social Security Fund with transparency and accountability. We encourage you to participate fully, ask questions, and share your insights. Once again, welcome, and thank you for being here as partners in strengthening social protection in Belize. At this time, I'd like to draw your attention to the agenda that you may have found on your seat. The presentations today will be done in 2 segments. One is performance highlights, and there will be 2 presentations that flow from that topic. You will notice on your agenda it says Ms. Arlene Neal as the presenter. However, there have been some changes, and I'd like to let you know that the presenter will be Mrs. Leticia Vega. Okay, she is the General Manager for the Research and Development Department. The next presentation will be done by Ms. Daisy Montero, who is the Manager for Investment Services. And then the next part of our presentation will be done by our CEO. Also, I would like to encourage you to participate in our feedback survey. When we do share the QR code with you, I encourage you to scan that code and also to participate and complete that survey form when it's time to do so. So now at this stage, you can see that the agenda is on the screen. I will now welcome Mrs. Leticia Vega to the podium, and she will do the presentation on benefits. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to see a room that's packed and happy to be a part of this stakeholder consultation to share with the people we serve, especially our tripartite partners, the workers, employers, government reps, and everyone present today. I also want to extend a good afternoon to Director Hyde, our CEO, and all of SSB management and staff who are here. Thank you for joining us. My presentation will highlight operational performance on the Social Security Board for the past years and focusing as well on where we are up to 2024. But before I go into the segment on benefits, we know when we speak about Social Security, we always think about 4 core functions. The first one is the registration, the gateway to Social Security, and you can register from birth onwards, right? Then the other one is the contribution collection compliance, what you contribute, your weekly contributions, in order for you to be actively insured. Then the third one, which is the main reason why Social Security exists, not only in Belize, but globally, is the benefits, And in that one is really why we need to pay, because we want to be covered during times of contingency. We always say from the womb to the tomb, right? So in times of contingency, you do have that benefits to look forward to. And then finally, the fourth one is investments. All those surplus or reserves we have, we invest those. And what we do is for those that are short-term investments, we feed into the short-term benefits and long-term investments for long-term benefits for current and future beneficiaries. So those are the 4 core areas. Now what I'm going to highlight on is the benefits aspect. For benefits, when we look at this chart here, we have a blue and a red line or orange-looking line. The blue line is the contributions, total contribution revenue from 2019 to 2020. What you will notice here, if you remember, prior to July 2019, we had a contribution rate of 8% and a contribution ceiling, if you remember those 15As that you had to fill out, at $320, right? But we had to, because we were approaching the period of equilibrium for the long-term benefits. And when you talk about equilibrium, you think about like a seesaw. When you have your expenditures and you also have everything that's coming in, your contributions, and also your returns on investments and your expenditures, primarily benefits payouts, right? When those are almost equal, that's what we refer to as the period of equilibrium. And by that year, we were already approaching that point, and we had to move swiftly and urgently, and that, if you recall, we had a contribution reform. And the contribution reform in Belize happened in a phased approach. In July 2019, we did increase the rate from 8% to 8.5%, and also the ceiling from 320 to 440. Then in 2020, we had a further increase, right, from the 8.5% to 9%, and then the ceiling from $440 to $480 weekly. Now, we were supposed to as well have an increase in 2021, but again, we were unexpectedly, globally as well, with the pandemic, COVID-19 hit, and there was no way that we could have approached you with an additional, now 1% that was left that year. So we deferred to April of 2022, when we had the final increase from, at that time, 9% to 10%, which is the existing rate right now, as well as the increase in ceiling from $480 to $520, which is the ceiling right now. Right? So all of that occurred during that period. Hence, you will notice that there is some kind of increase in the contribution aspect. And furthermore, after those persons were already paying more in terms of ceiling and rate, you saw the increase here. Trying to find a pointer. Hold on. Just a second. Anyway, I just point. the increase here in 2022 to 2023, 2024, it was even at a higher pace, right, with what is happening. Now, how does benefit expenditure match in terms of the contributions? We also see it that it's lower, and this is good news, when it's lower than our contribution revenue. But if you look at the beginning when I said 2019 was critical, it was narrower. And then after the 2021, we saw that the gap had increased, which is also great, given the different contribution reform that we had. Okay? Now, when we focus now, the benefits has 3 branches: short-term branch, employment injury branch, and long-term branch. I will start with the short-term branch. The short-term branch includes both sickness benefit and maternity benefit. During the period 2019 to 2024, for the contribution revenue, we notice here that it's always going up, with the exception of 2021. So you may be wondering what happened in 2021. This is just an actuarial ratio that was changed. The allocated amount for the short-term branch changed at that time. Actually, it was decreased to what is current now, the 9%, right? Sorry, 19% on the short-term branch. So it was like 22.5%, and it went down to 19%. And that's the reason why you see a little dip there in 2021. Then it started to increase after that point. In terms of the short-term branch expenditure now, you notice as well an increase, but more so, when COVID-19 was hitting Belize and a lot of claims were made, not only the number of claims, but also the duration of these claims were high. Again, if you remember before, that initially they were giving a lot of days. I think it was like 14, then went down to 10 and 5 and so on. So all of that impacted the fund for that particular, but that was our obligation. That's why we exist, to cover in times of need. Trying to move. Okay, this is the other slide. I hope I didn't skip any. Yeah, the top 5 diagnoses for sickness benefits that were allowed during the period of last year, in January to December. The highest one was the diseases of the respiratory system. That included 43%, almost half of all the cases. And that most of the causes for that group had to do with the common cold. And again, we are approaching that same time of the year, where we have a peak in those cases, as well as a lot of tonsillitis cases, amongst others, right? Then the second diagnosis was the certain infectious and parasitic diseases, 17%. Then we also had at 15% the disease of the musculoskeletal system, connective tissue, and 13% of cases were due to external causes such as injury, poisoning, and then lastly, in terms of the top 5, we had 12% with symptoms, signs, and abnormal clinical and laboratory findings, and not elsewhere classified. So these are just the top 5, right? Reasons for or diagnosis of sickness benefit claims. Now, let's look now on the other branch. The other branch is employment injury branch. An employment injury branch also includes injury, illnesses due to injury, and we talk about employment due to employment injury. We also have there the disablement benefits. We also have there medical care, as well as death benefits. So when we include all those, we see as well, in terms of the contribution revenue there, again, the same dip in 2021. And again, for EI, for employment injury, we also had a decrease in terms of its percent allocation of contributions. Currently, it is at 9%. I think it was like 12.5% before. That explains the reason why you have the dip there in 2021. Then the rest, you may wish this would be the scenario for all the branches, the huge gap between the two. That means we have a lot of surplus, right? A lot of surplus in the employment injury branch. When we look at the EI, employment injury by cause, the main one is the green-looking, fluorescent green-looking area, and that's more due to other accidents, including late effects, because we also have people claiming EI after, or acting up, employment injuries. The other one, which is the kind of blue-green colored, is the accidental falls, followed by accidental violence. Then we have transport accidents as well. That transport accidents right now is something we are watching very closely, especially with the lot of accidents that you hear, especially the motorcycles ones. The accidents caused by fire and flames, we also have that as a particular cause of interest, and then other violence. Then the other area, which is the orange-looking one, is the others. When we look at the industry now, the persons who claim employment injury, where did they work? A lot of the cases are in the agriculture sector, followed by manufacturing, then construction, then wholesale and retail trade, and lastly by accommodation and food service activities. The other one that, as I mentioned, that's not in this list is the transport, right? Which is the one that I'm saying that actually right now we are monitoring. It has increased by 50 more cases than last year's one. But when we look at these are solid numbers. So when we see, for example, a decrease in the agriculture or uncertain, we also see in the last years, in 2023-24, more like we are already stabilizing in a sense with the number of cases, but these are number of claims. In general, the dynamics and the work and the labor force of Belize has changed. Before it was a lot in terms of the agricultural sector. Now the agriculture sector is actually the 6th largest industry when you look at the entire active insured persons in the country. So a lot of shifts in terms of where our people are working. And of interest, this morning we were speaking about the mechanization of this, for example, in the sugar industry, where we cannot get king cutters, for example, people shifting to other industries. And the last branch is the long-term branch. Out of all the branches, this branch takes up a bit over 60% of all the benefit expenditures. Now, long-term branch includes retirement benefit, non-contributory pensions, and it also includes survivor's benefit, invalidity benefit, and funeral grants. Now, in this particular case, we don't see that huge gap as we saw with EI and sickness benefit. What we see is it actually widening up with the level in terms of the long-term benefit branch payments being very high, increasing drastically to 96.6 million, right? Compared, for example, to 60 million approximately in 2019. So this is the one that we have to be careful about, and the main one out of all the benefits. When we look at the pension recipients by year, it shows that level of increase as the scheme matures. We are now at 44 years. We started on June 1st, 81. And as the scheme matures, we see more pensioners coming, right? When we total all the contributory pensioners, not only the long-term, we put all pensioners, even those that are from EI, for example, disability pensioners and survivors benefits, and so. We see that there is a huge increase and a continuous increase with time. And as an observation, we have, for example, in 2030, reaching as high as 25,000 cases, compared maybe to 2021 when it was even half of that amount. But it's really increasing at a rate that is much higher than the rate of increase of our insured persons. So that has to do a lot with the sustainability of the fund as well. And that's it for this segment of the presentation on benefits, with touching a bit on contributions along with it. Any questions at this stage? Well, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Mrs. Vega. It looks like that presentation was crystal clear. I'd like to now welcome Miss Daisy Montero. She is going to do the next presentation on the investment portfolio.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Room is kind of full today, so thank you for being here. So before we go into the investment performance highlights, I will begin by stressing the importance of why the Social Security Board needs to invest. Every dollar contributed by Belizean workers has both a short-term and a long-term purpose, whether it's to meet current benefits or long-term benefits. It must be protected, it must grow, and it must be available when benefits are needed. Investing helps the fund earn extra income so benefits can be paid today and well into the future. Investing helps, a disciplined investment program supports sustainability and national development. What you will see today is how contributions are managed with discipline and a long-term view. On the first slide here, we have the investment portfolio for the period 2023 and 2024. The portfolio increased from $519 million in 2023 to $530 million in 2024. Of course, this value does not include the $11.7 million that we have in the audited financials for loan loss provisions. If you notice, government securities rose from $91 million to $98 million, strengthening the safest and most reliable sector of the portfolio. Infrastructure and construction increased from $38 million to $44 million with the addition of new public sector debt. Agriculture increased from $15 million to $18 million as part of a targeted approach to productive activity. Utilities moved from $189 million to $180 million after a long-standing exposure was fully settled. Telecommunications increased from $94 million up $4.8 million as a result of stronger performance in our telecommunication holdings. Overall, these movements reflect careful management of the portfolio, supported by scheduled loan repayments and market-driven changes across different sectors. This graph here shows the rate of return on the portfolio by sectors. All sectors recorded positive returns in 2024, which shows steady performance across the portfolio. Real estate delivered the highest return at a rate of 9.8%, reflecting increased income from the commercial building. Education, health, local government, and tourism each returned 6% or more, contributing meaningfully to overall earnings. Government securities and infrastructure and construction returned 5.7% and 5.6% respectively, providing dependable income from the CFS sector of the portfolio. Utilities recorded a return of 3.2%. The reason for this is that while one utility company performed exceptionally well, it was counteracted by loss in the other utility company, that's BTL and BEL. Here we have a line graph showing the 5-year nominal rate of return. The nominal rate of return measures how much the fund earned from its investment before inflation. And if you notice, it remained positive for all 5 years, from 6.3 in 2020 to 4.7 in 2024. Higher returns in 2020 and 2021 were driven by strong performance in government securities, infrastructure and construction, and utilities. The return eased in 2022 and again in 2024 because some of the larger equity holdings generated lower income during those years. These movements are normal in long-term investing and were cushioned by diversification across several sectors, as you saw in the previous slide. Over the 5-year period, the trend reflected consistent performance supported by the fund's core income-producing assets. This graph here shows the asset class mix between 2019 and 2024. If you notice, it includes cash and cash equivalents. However, in reporting the return on our portfolio, we do not typically include cash and cash equivalents, but we're showing it here to show a movement or the difference from what it was in 2019 to 2024. So between 2019 and 2024, the asset mix shifted in a way that reflects higher contribution inflows and careful investment decisions. Cash and cash equivalents rose from 28 million to 176 million, supported by higher contribution income, including wage band adjustments. Equities increased from $211 million to $239 million, mainly due to growth in the value of the fund's long-term shareholdings. Government securities and other public sector instruments increased by $29 million, strengthening the CFS portion of the portfolio. Real estate added $12 million with the completed commercial building, while private sector loans declined by 7.3% as older loans were repaid and fewer new loans were issued. The overall mix shows a more liquid and more balanced portfolio compared to 2019. Now, this pie chart here shows the portfolio by sector. So basically, what percentage each sector contributes to the overall portfolio. In 2024, utilities remained the largest sector at 34%, providing stable and consistent income, followed by telecommunications at 18%, which continues to deliver attractive returns. Government securities accounted for 19%, while infrastructure and construction made up 8%, reflecting long-term investments in public sector development. Real estate contributed 2%, while agriculture and tourism each held 3%. Education represented 0.1% as an older loan continues to be repaid. And local government and aquaculture remained very small exposures. This sector distribution supports income stability while maintaining measured participation across key sectors or key areas of the economy. Now that we've seen the share of the different sectors to the portfolio, we're now looking at the chart that shows the revenue by sector. In 2024, total revenues amounted to almost $24 million. Utilities generated the largest share of investment income at 41%, supported by steady coupon payments and dividends from long-term utility holdings. Government securities contributed 25% through reliable coupon payments. These are the coupon payments on the Government of Belize Treasury notes. Financial institutions and infrastructure and construction each accounted for 11%, reflecting consistent earnings from core areas of the portfolio. Real estate contributed 5%, while tourism and agriculture added 4% and 1%. The revenue pattern highlights the fund's reliance on dependable income sources while still receiving steady contributions from developmental sector. And that concludes the end of the presentation. I just want to close off by saying that we manage the portfolio with a lot of discipline, always keeping safety, and steady income at the front of our decisions. As we look ahead, we'll continue to be prudent with how we invest, while taking advantage of opportunities that can help strengthen returns for the fund. We expect to step into a more active investment period in 2026 and the years that follow, and this will be guided by careful planning and responsible risk management. Thank you. Any questions? Going once, going twice? No? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Montero, for that presentation. Right now, we want to switch over to a Slido question that we'd like for you to participate and give us your feedback. Shortly, there's going to be a QR code that is going to come on the screen. Please take out your phones, scan the QR code, and let us know what you think. The question is, what percentage do you think we should hold in foreign investments? 0%, less than 5%, or more than 5%? So let us know what you think, and we'll show you the results shortly thereafter. Results in real time. I know we have more than 45 people in this room. It looks like more than 5% is creeping up. This is important feedback. Thank you so much for participating. So we have 52% with less than 5% investment for let me say less than 5% for foreign investments, and more than 5% We have 45% of the group saying that we should invest abroad. We're pretty close though, pretty close. All right, thank you so much for your participation. Really love that. Thanks so much. At this time, I'd like to invite our CEO to the podium, Mr. Jerome Palmer. He will be doing the presentation on Scheme Outlook.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, everybody. I'm sitting at the front, so I did not appreciate everybody sitting in the room until I got up, right? Now, thanks for your participation in regards to giving us some feedback on that very critical question as we look at our portfolio. From where we sit at SSB, these type of dialogues is very important. It's key for us to get your feedback. Now, I wanted to touch on a couple points before I kind of dive into it. Let me see if I can maneuver this thing well. No. I'm trying to go back a step. There we go. All right. My colleagues spoke on a couple different things already. And I do want to just stress on a couple things before I get into my particular section here. First of all, it is the changes that we had to do around 2019 and moving forward. You would have noticed that the difference and the gap between contribution and benefit increased over the last few years. From the investment portfolio perspective, and that's the quickest one I can go to. Well, you know what? I'm going to dive right into it and use the explanation as I move. We're good with that? Yeah? All right. What I want to highlight, and I'll start here with the actuarial side, is that the fund has changed a lot since 1981. Let's go all the way back there, since 1981 to present. You will notice from what we have here, the benefit distribution has shifted. Compared to early in the 80s, where a lot of our payout was more focused on the short-term benefits, more of our payouts today are on the pension side. And that we expect to increase tremendously over the next few years. In one of the previous slides that Mrs. Vega showed, we saw in around 2021, we had about 12,000 contributory pensioners. That is saying that after 40 years, we had about 12,000 people now collecting a pension. Our projection in 2030 is showing that we expect about 25,000. Said differently, it took 40 years to have 12,000 people collecting pension. It will take another 10 to double that. And it's just a reflection of our maturing scheme, where people have contributed for 20, 30, 40 years and are now retiring. And it shows where the scheme is going. It impacts several things. Obviously, it impacts our pension benefit payout, but it also impacts the fund that we now need to focus on, which is on the long-term side. It highlights where we need to invest, again, on the long-term side. So when we look at it, just the evolution, we are going towards a more mature scheme. That is, we're going to be paying out more money and just increasing. Because rightfully so, we will have more people retiring year over year. The reserves as well has increased, and you notice now from 1981, it was at a slower pace, but over the last few years, it has increased at a faster rate. And there are a couple key reasons for that. One, the contribution rate was increased, going up to 10%. And two, the ceiling increase. Said differently, there's more coming into the fund. But if you recall from the previous slides, there's also more coming out of the fund. We're paying a lot more from the fund. These are the challenges that we are now seeing with respect to the scheme. It is informing us as to the changes that we will need to be looking at. It is an increasing reserves. More people will be entitled to collect that pension benefit. More outgo will be coming from that side. One of the key things we wanted to also bring to the attention of this for this engagement is with respect to our self-employed scheme. Our self-employed scheme is a voluntary participation. Now you will notice the big gap between people who we identified as being self-employed compared to what we actually cover. We over the last few years, the market has seen on average looks about 45,000 self-employed people. Unfortunately for SSB, the take-up has not been where it needs to be. So we have covered less than 2,000 persons, and that's accumulated over years. We've seen an increase, but it's accumulated. For us at SSB, it is a concern because unfortunately that means there's a significant part of our population that is working, self-employed, and not earning an entitlement of a pension benefit, especially when they reach that age. And it's quite likely at some point that even the self-employed will say, I pass my business on to my children, and maybe I want to step away, right? Or there may be other strains that actually impact them. So we do recognize that as a tremendous gap that we need to address, which takes me forward to some of my other points. I won't drill through the details of the self-employed, but I go to where we need to be looking at moving forward, some of the legislative amendments that we want to consider. And this is not exhaustive, it's just some of the items we've highlighted to bring to the consultation today. We have, for example, the wage ban, where we want to move away from what is a system that was established in 1981 that Belize is one of about 3-4 countries that still use a wage band system that we adjust to a percentage of salary system. It is a more fair system, it's a more fair approach, and it is something that we will have to engage and get some feedback on, but that is a shift that the scheme now, as we modernize, we have to think about. The adjustment to the contribution ceiling. We're very mindful that wages have increased. The government established a $5 minimum wage, and discussions around a $6 minimum wage. Wages in general have gone up. Some have gone up just to keep up with inflation. Some have gone up because of the supply and demand in the market, the increase in different sectors. But overall, we have seen where average wages have gone up. It impacts not just contribution, but on the pension benefit side as well. So we do recognize where we have to be looking at the ceiling. Over the last few years, we went from 320 to 520. Then there's the pension adjustments. Along the same line, retiring 20 years ago and collecting $100 has a different purchasing power today than it did 20 years ago. So what you could have bought with $100 in that goods of basket that we measure at SIB is you may not be able to buy that today, right? So there has to be an adjustment to keep up with that, a pension adjustment, if you will. That requires legislative change. And then finally on the self-employed scheme. Again, these are just a snippet of a few items we've already flagged, we've identified that we will have to work on in terms of legislative amendments. The self-employed scheme, we don't have enough participation, so there's a big section of our population that is essentially not covered within the Social Security scheme. They may have their own personal arrangements in place, but we do have a national responsibility, so it needs to be looked at closely. Now, beyond the legislative amendments, we wish to share some of our strategic priorities. Our strategic priorities, we've identified 4 priority areas that we're focusing on over the next 4 years. That includes good governance. Within good governance, We identified, firstly, whistleblower. And I highlight these as items that we definitely want you to be knowledgeable, to know of. This year, we launched our whistleblower system. It's available on our website. It allows for anonymity for submissions to be made. We had a session this morning with the media, and we discussed, for example, where maybe employers are not making contributions, and you know. There's a whistleblower's access that you can actually make a submission to advise us that we can then act on it. If you suspect some fraudulent activity, somebody collecting a benefit that maybe they shouldn't in some way or whatever, there is that whistleblower hotline, if you will. You can send the request in. It is anonymous. We will then review, we'll investigate. It goes through its own independent process, right? But that's a part of the good governance that we've approached. In addition to that, we have publications as good governance that we look at, where on an annual basis, we go through that full exercise, audited financial statements. We go through, we prepare, but we don't just prepare, we publish. You go on our website, you can find our audited financial statements going back years. Within those publications, for accountability and transparency, it does include information on like our investment portfolio. So that breakdown that Daisy mentioned earlier, a lot of that information is actually in that publication. Our actuarial reviews are up there, or a statistical abstract that has a wealth of information as well. That is in our efforts of more and increased transparency, accountability. We recently put on our website our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan, 2025-2029. So you can go right there, check it out, feel free to engage with us. In addition to that, in terms of good governance, is engagement. This is a part of that. This is a part of our efforts to improve our good governance. Engagement, where we are hoping to get feedback, not just where we can stand here and talk for a few hours and but engagement, where we can get your comments, your feedback, your input. All right? We did a similar session like this last year around this time. We did our SSB Connect in August, and I will advise you, we do have a few consultations that we're scheduling for early next year. So do look out for that. As we sort of amped up the need for legislative changes, we have to go through the engagement and the consultation. It is all a part of our strategic priority within the good governance framework. Beyond that, we have our scheme modernization that we look at. Within scheme modernization, there's the legislative reforms that we spoke about earlier. The changes that must take place. The changes that include what we mentioned earlier, and perhaps looking at adequacy of benefits. Benefits that were established maybe 44 years ago, and we need to revisit to see, okay, is this still applicable today? Does it still fall in line? Addressing any shortcomings in legislation. Looking to see that we have a legislation that speaks to the new way of work, where maybe that the law, because of how it was written, it did not envision the technological environment that we're operating in. That's all a part of legislative review that we must go through. It is a part of our scheme modernization effort that will take place over the course of the next few years. In addition to scheme modernization, we're looking at adopting technology. We have a mobile app that we've been developing that I am looking forward to our launching the version 1.0. That's the way we're calling it. When you look at social security, there's so much information that developing an app to capture all of it, you almost have to take baby steps, right? We were asked this morning about having an accident. I said, well, one accident could trigger 3-4 different claims. There's one accident that is an accident and sickness benefit because you're off from work. It may be an employment injury benefit as well that we need to look at. Unfortunately, if somebody passed away, there may be a funeral grant that needs to be paid. And if the person that passed has children, there may be survivor's pension that we also have to pay too. That one accident could trigger 3-4 different claims along different benefit line, right? But things like our app will help to support us getting information out there, to have more people aware as to what exactly is their benefits. In addition to the app, we have expanded portal services. You know, this year alone, we've launched a couple additional features on the portal that if you're not as engaged in the portal, I encourage you to do so. But the additional portal services that will expand. I'll touch on a couple of those a little in a few, so I'll move on to the next strategic priority area, operational excellence. We are looking at seeing how we can streamline processes and for service efficiency. We have established kiosks at our offices where people can come in and access the portal right at our office, right? Where we've established staff that can support, can guide, can advise. That's a part of service efficiency that we've looked at, that we want to see how we can improve upon as we continue to move forward. In addition to that, we're looking at improvements for turnaround time. That's a part of where we're saying submit your request for sickness benefit online. It removes some of the internal delays that might be there when you're submitting through pen and paper, right? It goes directly within your portal, your information. It's a more streamlined process that is there that should result in a quicker turnaround time. So for us, those become priority area, more administrative efficiency, allow us to actually cater for a better service for you. With respect to fund sustainability, there are a couple things that we're looking at. At the top of the list is secure investments. Earlier, we would have seen that the cash equivalent went from 28 million in 2019 to 175, 76 million in 2024. That is as a result of us adjusting the ceiling, adjusting the contribution rate. We now have a responsibility to invest that fund. Our approach is not simply invest, secure investments. Every investment brings their own element of risk, but our approach is one of secure investments, safe investments, getting an adequate return. So all that due diligence we must go through, that's right at the forefront of us on our agenda. And that's a key part of our strategy moving forward. We are working on increasing compliance, the contribution. We want all employers who should be participating to be participating and submitting the funds, submitting the contribution that goes into the fund, right? So we are looking at systems that will increase compliance. Internally, we've developed the portal that everybody can access. Internally, we've also developed tools for our inspectors that support compliance. And we're looking at additional tools that can support them. We're looking at engagement that we can work with other partners to work within the society to make sure we have all employers on board, that everybody who should be contributing to the fund is contributing. And they're contributing at the level that they should be. We do that, we will have a more sustainable fund. And then finally, adequate returns on investments. That is at the top of the list as well. We want secure investments, but we also want adequate returns. We noticed earlier real estate investment generating about 9-10% return. Some other investment about 6%. Depending on the nature of the investment, you know, some investment may give you 2-3%, others may give you 4 or 5, others may give you 8, 9, 10. A diversified portfolio, see that, right? We want adequate returns on our investments. So we have to look for items that will be secure but also give us a good return, a good value for money. Now, I'll shift over to some of the portal features that we've launched. We did a bit of a soft launch and some of the upcoming launches just for you to be aware of to look out for. So far from a launch perspective, we have a couple items we've launched. First, the registration portal. We've launched it a little while ago, and everybody should be familiar with that one. Then there's the sickness benefit claims portal that we launched earlier this year. We did that launch around January, February, a soft launch. We worked through a lot of the little kinks and informing people. The take-up now is where we want it to be, so we're trying to move now fully online come December 1 with the sickness benefit claims. In addition, within the portal, we have your contribution history where people can access and view. where it is interesting when you sit in a room and people go back and view, they're like, oh, I forgot I work at this place. And the contribution history shows that, right? Or go back and like, it's been so many years and so much contributions and, contribution history. That's a key part. Just reviewing right now that we want people to go in there and review it for several reasons. One, to make sure that your employer is actually submitting the contribution. But two, as people are moving towards retirement, and the retirement benefit is tied to contribution, go back and make sure it is accurate, it is current. We are dealing with 44 years of history, of data, of information that was stored on pen and paper until where we are today, and we're still transitioning, right? So go back, review your contribution history. But that was a feature that we launched this year. That's one of the more significant things that people need to be aware of. And then finally, the online contribution payment for employers. More efficiency, more direct match. It's a direct movement from an employer assigned immediately to the individual IP's account, right? We launched that, I think, a couple of years ago now. That's running very nicely at this point, right? But those we've launched. Then we did a soft launch, the application of retirement benefit. We did our soft launch in August with respect to that, the retirement benefit, and we've already had a few people who actually go through the portal and made the submission to receive the benefits. We've launched that. We've worked on that. Again, added features them to the portal. Upcoming launches, there's 2 additional features with respect to the portal that is upcoming. The first, funeral grant. The second, maternity benefit and grant. Both items are upcoming. Our expectation that we should be in a position to do a soft launch before the end of this year. So look out for that. Again, that means removing the need for pen and paper submission coming into the offices and things like that, right? And that would have taken several of our benefits in terms of making the request to go through directly through the portal. SSB, we are progressing. We're moving towards becoming a lot more dynamic. And our aim at the end of the day is for sustainability so that SSB can be around not just for the current generation, but for the future generations. All right? Those are the essence of what I wanted to bring in terms of outlook. I trust I've been able to touch on a lot of what we're moving ahead to. I do open the floor for questions. Maybe it might be lucky like Leticia and Daisy and no question. But I do open it up for questions from the audience.
Hi, hello. Good afternoon. My name is Jael. I'm from Belize Water Services. I just wanted to ask, in terms of the on-the-job injury, when would that be available online to submit, or is it something that you foresee?
That is a part of more of the future. I can't give you a timeline yet with respect to that one. That we've prioritized where, for example, the number of claims for on the job is not as frequent as like the number of sickness claims. So we prioritize the sickness claim. From an administrative perspective, we recognize that as the most efficient to prioritize. And you notice we launched that, we worked through the kinks. And then some of the other benefits, retirement, maternity, funeral. So employment injury is up on the list, but we've not yet worked through that because we deal with this launch. We have the app coming up, and we also have to work through sensitizing people in doing the submissions. But that is definitely a bit down the road for us.
Hi, Gabrielle Holtz from the Ministry of Economic Transformation. I had a question about the strategic priority areas that you were touching on. I'm not sure if this is included in your strategic plan, the 5-year strategic plan that you mentioned, but just for the purpose of this discussion, I wanted to know if there were target indicators associated with each of those priority areas. For example, target ROIs that you want to reach on your investments, or even a number of resolved cases from the whistleblower portal, if they're embedded within the strategic plan, or if that's something that we can see or have access to.
The way we've established our target is not quite as specific like an ROI, and there's reason for that. We are dealing with a dynamic portfolio where, for an investment perspective, we have to both take advantage of opportunities that are out there that come to us. Opportunities for bonds, debentures, equity, and so forth that we want to look at. And also opportunities that we may wish to develop. New securities, facilities, buildings, we have to look at all of that. Within each one, we may develop an RI. What we have to look at as well is portfolio, diversification, allocation, security. So our measure on that actual target, goes beyond just the investment, and it includes the risk, the diversification, the asset class. So it's a bit more comprehensive that we've done with respect to it. So we do have indicators that we've developed to monitor and track and move forward. We recognize we're simply putting like a return on investment may limit the scope as to what we have to consider given the nature of what we do.
Hi, good afternoon. Don Ortiz from J. and Sons. I actually have 3 questions. The first one is there any intention to include the estimated pension and retirement benefit that you get online?
On the app.
On the app?
To answer your question, yes, we do have a calculator within the app that we've developed. Within the next couple of months, we will launch the app. It will be an estimate as is, because everybody's situation is different and unique. But in the app, it will be right there. The calculator, we've done a lot of demo. I think our team is excited for us to launch, but it will be available on the app. Yes.
All right, thank you so much for that. And my second question is there any consideration for a rebate or reward for not utilizing your sickness benefit? You know, there's some people who work for a lot of years and they don't use that benefit.
You know, I would say I appreciate where you're coming from with respect to it. Our hope would be that nobody needs to submit like an employment injury claim, because it means that we have a more safe workplace. We would want nobody to get sick. That's not the nature of it. It does comes in ebbs and flows. Our biggest strain, as we saw earlier, comes back down to the retirement benefit, the pension. And what we offer in a benefit, I think I highlighted, 1 accident may trigger 4 claims just after that 1 accident, right? So from a benefit perspective, it's not always a direct match. So yes, you may not have fallen sick, and we should be grateful for that, but there are other benefits that you would be entitled to. And those benefits also cost. For us, it is a pooling that we must do, a pooling to determine what is an adequate rate that can sustain the fund, and we then move along that line, and an appreciation that surplus then goes into the fund, the reserve, and be able to help for future claims. Take like a COVID situation with sickness claim. We hope there's no more COVID situation, but it may very well end up that we end up with a type of environment where you have increased claim because of that type of thing, things like COVID.
Okay, and then since we're on that topic, I just wanted to clarify something for me. I've heard conversation from other persons saying that when you don't use your sickness benefit, there's a calculation in your retirement that takes into consideration how you would have used your sickness benefit over the years. Is that so?
No, the retirement benefit is a straight entitlement based on your contribution over years and the wages that you're contributing at near the retirement. So there's not a consideration for the sickness benefit.
Okay. My last question, thank you so much, is in terms of the death benefit, is there any consideration, I know this would be futuristic, but in terms of coverage for a dependent who would have died and for example, a child passed away and there's death benefit for that child to the insured person?
That's going into the realm of specific insurance products as opposed to just a social security scheme, right? So in simplicity, those become futuristic thing that if it is something we would wish to develop, we would have to give some consideration. What is the appetite? What would be the relative benefit? What would be the relative cost for us to actually do so? It is not typical within the social security scheme, and I think we have so many other items that we need to look at and address that becomes one that maybe is something that we want to consider down the road, doing your adequate research and everything else to say, okay, let's develop something like that.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Orbel. I'm here from Omega Real Estate Belize. Probably a clarification. You said that the self-employed puts Social Security at a risk when it comes. Is that when it comes to funding? Is that because of the contribution that they collect on the benefits at the end?
The reality of the self-employed scheme is that the number of people participating is not sufficient just to maintain self-employed. If we have 2,000 persons participating and just the pension benefit alone is significant. Our concern from a Social Security perspective is that we have over 40,000 persons who are self-employed that are not covered. If that becomes our fundamental concern. There's a significant portion of our population that is not covered under Social Security. And that is where we look at to see, well, where can we make adjustments to actually improve that, to ensure that they actually have a better entitlement of benefits.
Okay, because majority of the self-employed are created by people leaving the job, right, or not having employment. What about those self-employed that have been creative and have them own, they are entrepreneurial, but they have made contributions before and they don't claim? I mean, doesn't that actually balances out everything at the end?
Well, if you've made contributions before as a regular employee, you would still have that contribution towards your benefit at retirement. So if we do have people, I spoke with one person who in the diaspora, and I said, yeah, you worked over 10 years before you went out there, you have a benefit entitlement at retirement age because you've worked all that time. And it's similarly with self-employed. They worked all that time, there's a benefit entitlement that they have. What we want to look at is to see how we can actually improve what is there at the self-employed, so perhaps it can be more complementary with what was already given in the other scheme. But it is not necessarily a loss of benefit, because come retirement age, they should still submit, and it may be a grant that they're entitled to or a pension benefit, depending on their contributions over time.
And also, just coming to that, gives you a question: does the quota, can you guys derive from this that there is a large amount of people that are self-employed right now have not reached that contribution level?
We at best would be able to identify who have participated over time and what their accumulated contribution would be. Because you have persons who contributed for years, may have contributed for 10 years and then chosen not to contribute anymore because perhaps they migrated to the US, perhaps they decided to be a housewife or a house husband. There are many different avenues. For us, we have to appreciate where opportunities may lie, where we would want more people to participate. And we have to now look at how can we develop structures that can encourage people to participate so that they have that benefit entitlement. At the best, at least a pension that they can get at that particular age. It does help nationally towards poverty alleviation and so forth.
Okay, I don't know if it's a clarification or a question, but I noticed in the real estate, because I'm in real estate, is it that the real estate industry, because I notice a gap of contribution and benefit is very high. Is it that real estate is contribution more in the funds? That's what I'm trying to get on that. Is it that they're not claiming?
No. What you saw there was the portfolio, the investment portfolio, different than the claimants, the insured persons. The portfolio return on real estate is one of the larger one. That is mostly generated through rental income from property we've developed and built. But that's what you're seeing there in terms of that difference right there. But so it's not, that's the investment portfolio side, not the IP side.
That includes the asset from Social Security, right?
That's the asset for Social Security, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
This is not a question, but it's more rather a suggestion. You said that you would need more self-employed persons. How have you work with the Ministry of Economic Development? Because right now, they have an amnesty program out where for the small business owners, for the you know, the amnesty tax. And what requirement is that you need to have different, you have to register like your business with tax and with the trade license now that has now been in the villages as well. So why don't you guys implement such thing with them that they have to register with, you know, SSB, and that way you alleviate the entire situation with not having small business owners register for social security.
Well, first of all, we are engaging with the various ministries them so that we can get some information and support and target more of the self-employed. However, participation in the self-employed scheme is currently voluntary. So even if we encourage, we meet with them, they still have to decide if they wish or don't wish to participate. We do find that as a challenge because it means that people are not prioritizing contributing to social security. We've also seen where once they recognize perhaps the benefit of it, then they could, but it does take a different pitch for us to get there. So what I'm saying is that we are engaging with different ministries so we can get that information. We've met with rural development. We're familiar with the licenses. We've met with the respective CEO. Same thing with local government for issuance of license. We're working to get some of that information so we can work with small businesses, with self-employed persons. However, participation is still voluntary. And that's what I'm getting at. So I hear you, but it's not that they must participate. It's up to them if they wish to participate. So we're working so we can get more info and can reach people, but they still have to elect and say, yes, I will want to be a part of the scheme. And that's the way it is currently constructed.
Good afternoon, Peacework Belize. I think one of the problems or one of the issues that need to be addressed is that many entrepreneurs are not aware of the benefits of social security. And so we have to do more education, more awareness. I'm telling you because I remember when social security had just come out, people were skeptical. They thought it was some kind of scheme to scam them and whatever. There are still a lot of people who do not understand the system and they will not pay into it. So you must do awareness. And it has to start in schools. It must start in school. Catch them young so that they understand. This needs to be done.
Agreed. And that's where these engagements are important. Consultation, information. The development of the app, we're hoping that we can put information at people's fingertips, that they will know more about social security. And also where we partner with other agencies that we can do more targeted, that we can actually focus a little differently to get the information out. Because like I said earlier, there's not a full appreciation that one occurrence may lead to 2, 3, 4 different claims. The people, when you're paying into the fund, you're not just paying in for a sickness benefit, you're paying in for several different things that you may be entitled to.
You mentioned earlier that regarding legislative adjustment, you would like to move away from wage ban. Balancing with equity and factoring inflation, what are other methodologies that could possibly be used to kind of create equity in moving away from the wage ban?
Well, the move away from wage ban is more of a structural administrative move where at the moment the wage ban system creates different contribution splits. By that I mean people on the lower wage bands, the employer contribute more than the employee. On the higher wage band, it actually goes up a bit more. And then people that contribute on the wage band contribute at the midpoint. So somebody who's earning a little less actually contributing more than earning, somebody who's earning a bit more actually contributing less. Those imbalances need to be addressed. So the shift is a structural shift that will ease in terms of administration. It will remove, for example, all the finance and accounting employers that have to go through and like, okay, you're under this wage band, you're under this wage band, you're under this for each employee, where they will be like, okay, it's a straight line, straight match, straight payment, more efficiency, just to get, for our purposes, get to a cleaner, more efficient administrative objective. And that is the shift in terms of it. Just about every country has already made that shift. We now need to go through that process.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And secondly, you mentioned from a long-term sustainability, you want to increase long-term investments for pension. Question, has there, with the launch of the portal and gathering data, has there been any assessment between the short-term benefits that are being claimed versus what is being contributed, to see if there is any mechanism needed to kind of adjust that to balance off? If there is, you find that there may be substantial in terms of short-term being claimed versus what is being contributed.
The short term by nature is going to be volatile, and we will see that. So depending on the occurrences of sickness, if there's an epidemic in the country, it's going to be cyclical, and it may be up and down. The long-term growth is because people are contributing and they eventually will reach retirement age. And it's likely that most people will reach retirement age, so we will have a natural growth that moves in that direction. For us, we do review it year over year. The allocation is more a nominal allocation where we allocate, but it does not, for all intents, impact the overall fund that we still have to look at. And that is why when we started today, we looked at the complete contribution and complete benefit. The reality is that if at any point all the benefit that we're paying out is exceeding the contribution, we're running into problems. But because it's a combined benefit system, we're not then separating it up and saying, well, only this portion is just going into that. It's about sustainability of the entire program and not select parts of the program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Palmer. First of all, I really want to congratulate and recognize the whistleblower platform that you guys have introduced. I think that deserves a huge round of applause. It's unfortunate that I never see the need to partner with government, with the chamber, for us to have something like this on a national level to curb the level of corruption that exists, not only in social security, but at the national level, because when there's a budget deficit, government will issue securities that brings return to you, but that we still have to pay for. Right? So I see some folks from the chamber here. I think that's something that we really have to address. We can't continue to operate in these little fragments. I mean, everything is connected. We're all connected in one way or the other. So, but I really want to give a big respect on that, and I hope that it yields success. You would have touched on a proposal and possible change in legislation for the contribution to be tied to a percentage of salaries. Now, from a tax perspective, works beautiful. My concern here would be clearly a good or careful assessment would have to be done on the salaries across sectors, both public and private, because in my non-informed position, I would think that when you look at salaries, the bulk of people are at the lower end, and I'll speak from the public service standpoint. You have 60% of your people there under $30,000 for the most part. So if you tie it to salaries and you don't carefully try to match those percentages that comes out of one's salaries to maintain where you are right now, you could see a significant drop. Or if you want to maintain it, you won't have to tax everybody at the top above a certain threshold very higher. So I think you require one comprehensive review and analysis of where we are in terms of salaries, and we know that with minimum wages is slavery wage. So for me, I'm not. I hope I not say something like that in a rush, right? At least, and I depend on the lower end, so it wouldn't really affect me, right? All right. I have to speak for my doctors now. We applaud technology. I mean, that's the way to go. But the doctors are saying, and I do not speak for them, but I have to listen to them complain every time. They're saying Social Security used to employ people to receive these claims, to input these claims, to process these claims, and whatever the different processes are. They're saying that they have approximately 20 minutes per patient, and they're seeing hundreds of patients because we know that's a big thing. So they're saying they now have to input these sickness claims, and they simply don't have the time. They're saying there is no clerks to support them. They're also saying there is no workstation. And I will say to you, if you visit the Western Regional Hospital where you're at, they're doing it off their phone, on their data. So when Social Security took this decision, I'm trying to ask them, and I had a meeting with them last week, so what was the level of consultation, and with whom? Was it with the president? Because clearly the people who are now forced to do the work are saying, we want compensation for the work, because we're now tasked to be input clerks. That's essentially what they're saying. And so I think that's something that while I will fully support technology, I think that that's something that needs to be considered, especially in the public sector. No workstations, and nobody to input. And basically, they're reaching the point, they're already burned out, where they're saying they're reaching the point, but basically, then just to prescribe sick because they don't have the time.
Can I comment in respect to your 3 points? First, with respect to the whistleblower, thank you. I do appreciate it. I think we as Social Security have a responsibility in-house to make sure that we are doing things in a certain way, and we've pushed for that. If we were to wait to full coordination with government, I'm not sure when we may launch, right? And I'm not trying to cast any aspersion, but we also have accountability. We work as a statutory board in a very independent way. So we took that step. So, but thank you so much. I do appreciate the compliments there. In terms of the second point with wages, I want to make sure I separate and explain, because firstly, the discussion with ceiling is a bit different than the discussion on the wage band. The wage band at the moment may be from 0 up to the 520 different bands. 520 becomes the ceiling. Our determination is that the wage band as is, administratively, it creates some unfairness, because depending on where you're at, you either pay more or less. Unfairness because depending if on the lower, the employer is paying more, on the higher, the employer is paying less. You know, so the fairness is a question that is there. Efficiency, it takes longer for you to process transactions within a wage band setup, because you have to go through all the individual wage band to determine what to do. So there are different reasons to move from that. Our suggestion is a removal of the wage band and going to a straight percentage. 10% of salary between your floor and your ceiling. I think that's a straightforward understanding. Whatever your salary is at between, for the moment, say $0 and 520, it's just 10% of that, that's your contribution. Split between employer and employee, right? Now, to add up to what I think is the greater point, the ceiling, which is a different point, right? The ceiling, and that's where you're speaking, so many people are under 30,000, and what we are seeing, about 30% of our contributors are already at the highest ceiling. So it's telling us that we have to look and make adjustments therein. Because a good portion of our people, income may be more than that, and so on the adequacy side, there's a concern there. So that we're already seeing. If 30%, I will just increase. It will increase for several reasons. As minimum wage goes up, everything else goes up. So if you don't adjust the ceiling, it's like you're taking this space and you're keeping the same place, but the floor going up, going up, going up. And people now are earning beyond that. People are already on the 6th floor, right? So that's why we have to separate the two. What we have seen as well is that in the higher 2 bands, about half is already there. So immediately it's driving that direction. With the shift in the minimum wage, we were actually seeing hardly anybody is on the lower bands, which is telling us the floor is no longer as adequate as what it used to be. But those are discussions that we have to push forward, and it's discussion that we have to push forward sooner rather than later. We can't delay or we get there. With respect to your last point, the entire healthcare system perhaps need a reassessment. If you're going to the doctor, you would want to know that they have good data entry to track your case, so that when you come in 2 years' time, they can refer back and, oh, you know what, this happened. Or when you come in 6 months' time, and you might have to deal with a different doctor, that information is there. So from a clerical data entry, I think there's tremendous opportunity nationally for there to be more tracking of data, more support right at that upfront level. I think Ministry of Health has developed their own system that goes across and they can capture. When we do that, we get more information then that supports trends. Where do we need to prioritize? Where do we need to put more clinics? What are the prevalent conditions that we have to do more education on? So from the hospital perspective, there may need to be a rethought, if you will, a rethinking as to where the priorities may need to be, because that's where the data starts. It doesn't start at Social Security. It starts at the insured going to the doctor. They're making the diagnosis. We're not making the diagnosis. It is a broader conversation that needs to be had, where perhaps we got to look at efficiency so it can be done in a faster way, determining needs. Perhaps scanners that can read right off the paper and it goes into your system, but it is something that has to be looked at. Our approach has been trying to work where people are at. So if they get it filled out and they need to submit, they can come into the office, go behind one of our workstation, access the portal and make the submission. We have doctors who have submitted, who are participating actively on the healthcare feature for their portal, and we see how the efficiency goes up. There's better tracking and information. It improves the data gathering and mitigates against fraud. When you avoid some of those little issues and you start with the data entry up front, you're in a better position. So I think it's a wider conversation that we need to have. It's not as simple as we're trying to get more people at their staff. No, we have a responsibility to get good information and upfront as we can upfront. And as beyond the credibility, with that integrity, where they're documenting it, that helps us. Even when it goes through the portal, the final approval comes to the employer. Again, that's a mitigation. You get a specific notification, right? Those are steps that help us to ensure that we have a more sustainable fund, because you to the extent possible, start to eliminate some what may be fraudulent behavior.
I will just respond to that Mr. Palmer, by stating that it's important that I think Social Security look at how it can support putting in the infrastructure to get the quality data that it wants. I'm saying to you that there's a huge gap there, and you will have problems, because I'm telling you will have problems in terms of the long-term process that you have in place, right? And then just finally on the investment side, one question or one observation, and perhaps coupled with a question. I know that in the return for telecommunications, well, first there was an increase over the 23-24 period, but there was no return on it, or at least none was demonstrated. All the other sectors were represented. Any reason for that on the telecommunications side of things? That was it. Because I noticed utilities was separated. Oh, okay. Okay, for telecommunication. Yeah, I was just wondering why that wasn't. Yeah, and then just for clarity, when Colin Young was CEO, I can clearly recall his presentation campaigning for this increase, and the return on investments on the portfolio would have hovered around $20 million, and that would have been what, 2018, 2019? And I think I heard you say that you're still around that 21 million? 24?
Yeah, it's 24 million.
24 right now?
Yeah, the investment
okay,
income,
so
almost 24.
Okay, so at least we have one increase.
Yeah,
Thanks.
okay.
It's important to recognize that with the investment portfolio now, a shift will take time. You're moving now from cash and cash equivalent to trying to move to assets that can actually generate greater revenue.
Good day, Mr. Palmer. One question. In the event employee wants to apply for sick leave on behalf of a child, will Social Security accept that down the road?
Family benefits. That's one of the areas that I know we've looked at in terms of perhaps where we need to look at some legislative amendments and improvement and enhancement. There are two areas that I think we need to look at: family benefits, which that will fall in line with, and unemployment insurance. So that is something that we will eventually have to get to see if we can incorporate that in terms of the benefits package. Bearing in mind that adding new benefits means there's an increased cost, which may be in an increased contribution rate.
Hi, I'm Latifa Augustine from Election and Boundaries Department. I want to piggyback on a question from Mr. Dean. When it comes to the doctors inputting these papers into the system, I have encountered, because we have been pushing with our employees at Election and Boundaries to fully utilize the portal, but I have encountered some situations now where my employees are coming back and telling me that that the doctors haven't emailed them the forms, or the doctors haven't inputted it in the system, and I know that we have a time frame, 14 days to input it, or else the claim will be disallowed. What is there in place for these things? Because it's not the employee's fault. It's on the fault of the doctors.
Well, I can't give a blanket response as to what may be the case, but I will say that those are things then that we would have to investigate and understand, well, what are the delays, what are the issues, what adjustments do we need to make. The employee does have a responsibility to get in that information. So there's a different follow-up that needs to perhaps take place. So from where we sit, we have to be able to go through and review where issues may be within the process. As we roll out, you may recall that I had said we did a soft launch at the end of January, February, and the intent for the soft launch was to allow us to start to work through some of those challenges. We've been able to do more sensitizing, get more people on board, but we recognize where for us to fully appreciate the system and for us to also identify what our proper challenges, we need to get everybody now just going through the portal. As we recognize the issues, we will have to then determine how best we can go about addressing them.
So my next thing now with that is that, because these are happening to several different employees, a lot of employees are not aware that they can challenge these disallowances. And this is where educations come in, the education from Social Security part. I think I've went over your websites and everything, and I'm not certain, I have not seen anything pertaining to where you can challenge these disallowances when they take place. Because I have told employees, go to Social Security. Let them be aware of why these claims are late. Let them know that it's coming from the doctor, it's being submitted late from the doctor's side. But so far, one or two of them have done it, and they said they haven't received any. I don't know, maybe they don't have proper, maybe it's not being explained well to them. But I would want to suggest that you guys, for an interim period, put out something out there for people to be aware that, you know, if this happened, you can do this, in layman terms.
Within our responses, there usually is a guidance that, you know, if you're not satisfied, then you can actually do this. So within our responses, it is there. And that's a bit more focused in doing it, as opposed to just the full education info that people actually see with their respective submission. If it is disallowed, then there's a process involved, and our advice actually indicates that.
No, I think I've cut most of your presentation. I don't see on the thing that you've touched anything about NHI. I just want, are you guys still stakeholders when it comes to NHI? What is that looking like?
Well, NHI is still under current legislation under the Social Security Board. NHI is funded differently than the rest of the scheme because that is a direct government funding to support the NHI program. So from where we sit in terms of like contribution revenue, it's not impacted by NHI. We don't include NHI. When we talk about benefit payouts, we don't include NHI because it is not form a part of benefits within the Social Security scheme itself. In many ways, it falls under the Social Security Board. However, it works independent because of the financing mechanism and the different things in place.
We participated in that quick survey just now. Obviously, there has been conversation as to foreign investments. What would be some of those that you would engage in?
Specific foreign investments? Foreign investments is another realm that requires a deeper conversation. I think we must appreciate that. In terms of the market out there, there are different types of opportunities that may be available for foreign investments. Those may be government securities issued by a particular government. They may be municipal securities, they may be corporate bonds, they may be equity. And that's why I'm saying there has to be a different discussion then as to what may be the best appetite for the Social Security Board if we're looking at foreign investment and to what extent. It is a different market. It operates differently than our Belize market because even from an accounting perspective, you're dealing with market value as opposed to book value at purchase, and that changes every day because of the market. So from a pool portfolio, our first question is really like, okay, should we place up to what amount we could place? And then we could start to have discussion as to like, okay, what that portfolio may look like if we're carving out, say, I think the majority was less than 5%. If we're looking at less than 5%, what would that look like in terms of a portfolio? What would be the best options then that we would consider? The different options that we have, I would have to review all of them.
Hello. I noticed the question on the doctors is a recurring subject and a source of frustration. However, that topic requires a whole national discussion on the public health system, the NHI system, and the private doctors in terms of a medical platform, a data platform for everyone who seeks health solutions. And that is the crux of the matter. We could try a lot of things, but until we could get everybody on board where that data flows seamlessly from RARA, from NHI, to the health system that they have in place, to the private doctors' health system, what we need is maybe a legislation that would put and force everybody on one platform so when they input the data for a particular patient, it shows up automatically and it gets captured by Social Security system automatically. So all the doctor would have to do is check off a few boxes to reflect what has transpired with that particular patient, so we capture it. So that is not an easy solution. It requires a national coordinated and legislative, because it's also privacy issues in terms of safety of your medical. You don't want your medical information be shared with different groups. Even government, some private people might not want some government department or private department having access to their medical information. So that issue is not going to go away. It requires a huge investment on time, resources, and money, and a discussion among groups nationally. So I just wanted to share that with you because I know that's a big problem. It's frustrating, but we don't have that solution until we want to deal with it in a big way, in a real way. If we need to man up on that issue in terms of the health system. The health system have to be better. And I think we need to press upon the people who have leadership to deal with this issue, because it's a real issue. That if we could do that, it will help us in terms of not just social security, but also the help the patient in a better way in terms of getting their issues resolved in diagnostic care, in assistance. But that by itself is a whole another thing, and I don't want people to believe that that's an easy issue to deal with, because it's not.
Thank you, Director.
Hi, my question, well, it's not a question, but more of a suggestion based on the portal. We have cases whereby some employees do get their sickness benefit, sickness claim. We process it as HR department. However, you know, they return before the time period, right? They decide to come in, but there is nothing in the portal on our aspect of the employer section whereby we could at least comment return on such a date before. Is there something that maybe we, as an employer section, could have a comment there if we have any comments in return, just in case, you know?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because I think that our team would have to take note of that to see then what could be possible ways in which we can approach that. Indeed, that's an impact to us, because it means less benefits that we would pay out, so definitely it's an impact. And I think most employers would prefer to have the employee at work anyways. So definitely that's something that we may need to look at from our team to see how we can put something in place.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Nina Callis here, BNTU. As a representative of employees, I feel the need to join the discourse as it pertains to the medical point being raised. I respect what you have shared and what the gentleman in the front said earlier, but I do believe that something can be done in the interim. If you enter the social security number, I believe that the field should automatically fill itself the minute you enter the number, and all the doctor would have to do then is to write up whatever ailment he or she is dealing with at the moment, and if he or she is going to award, let's say, medications and time off. But something has to be done. I don't think that while we're waiting for the bureaucrats to make up their mind what will happen, employees will be suffering. So I want to challenge the Social Security to really see this as a serious matter, because employees are losing benefits, and because the knowledge is not out there with the fact that you can challenge it. And many see Social Security as highway robbery. It takes their contribution, it's difficult for them to get anything back. So we really need to address that matter. If there's anything that you need from us as the unions, because members have been coming to us, let us know. We're willing to champion this, but employees should not suffer for this. And the last thing I want to make known, the fact that our contributions automatically come out of our salary. We have no say. Therefore, it is imperative for this matter to be addressed.
Thank you for that feedback, and if you don't mind, I'll look at it from the perspective of one, appreciating your comment, because what we have found is that we take time to develop these features. We work through it, we work through the kinks, and we roll them out. We need feedback to see what enhancements, what improvement, what adjustments are then needed. To the question earlier with respect to portal for employment injury, we can't say when we'll get to that, because we recognize that there are certain enhancements that perhaps we need to look at with the portal as is and the existing features to see where we can make some improvements. So when we get that type of feedback, we have to take stock of it. We have to consider, okay, to what extent do we now need to refine? The users will have a different experience than the developers, than when we launch it. So from where we sit, we've identified some of that we need to go back and deal with, and we're going to work through that. I appreciate that in terms of it is populated there. There's a drop-down that provides or populates some fields automatically, and I think our team has taken note of that to make sure as we move forward, we identify those and see what we can do to support. So thank you for that.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Mr. Palmer.
Good afternoon.
Um, my name is Mr. Hernandez. I'm from Ministry of Sustainable Development. Um, by looks of things, I think I'm the youngest person in the room. So I just want to ask a serious question, no? Well, my mother she used to be a public servant, no? But she retired early due to arthritis in her knee, right? But the other day we were having a discussion and she told me that the new age to receive pension is 60 years old, right? I don't know if that is true, but I just want to ask you this question because ever since I obtained my social security card and when I reach a certain age limit, so someone can employ you, I could recall I work like from 14 or 15, right? And currently I have 9 years in the government. And before I work at government, I do all kind of job, I work at Jebco, even I go at UB, I do construction, and everybody may pay social for me and what's not, no? But my real question is that from my research, and technology play a big role right now, especially like AI and then stuff. Like I Google like what are the average age persons, especially in Belize, live up to. And persons, like most persons right now, not they live past 75 or so. Barely reach 60. So what I want to know is like, would it, I know like social security, like yes, I look out for people and things, but first and foremost, I see just like you be right, like the word about money. First of all, like no disrespect to nobody, I know I talk about future this, future that, but I mean like we can well Ono can't do nothing like for example like for reduce the pension age to a lower age because really and truly people now live for 660. I know a lady that died last week or so. When me retire like 1 year or two before and she didn't receive none of the benefits and she dead left that. You understand me? So I want to know like, and this is one of the reasons why I so invested in the government of Belize because before I don't see myself to retire in the government, I see myself to resign, right? But resign on a good note. I want to resign my whole family early. You understand me? But you don't know if you're 60. You understand me?
First of all, I do hear the passion in your voice in speaking and bringing the matters forward. So I do appreciate that, and I could understand and appreciate the sensitivity dealing with a direct family member in respect to it. So I can understand where you're coming from. I'm not sure where the notion of the new retirement age because I think it's been 60 for a very long time. And
Yes.
hold up,
Sorry.
and hold up. And I know that there's differences in retirement age because in some sectors there's the 55. For social security benefit, it is 60 at the earliest, and it has been 60 from beginning. So for social security benefit, right? Which is different than government pension or, so there's different entitlement. And I encourage people to know your benefits, your entitlement to from your various employers and everything else, right? When it comes to average age, there is average age that may be 75. And we know within our society, people who don't live to see 20. And we know people who are celebrating to turn 90. And that's the nature of having an average age. Some people will benefit from a long extended pension, some people may not. That is sadly the nature of it. What we provide is benefits that goes beyond pension. There is the opportunities for the funeral grant, for the survivor's pension in the event that people contributed and they have minor children and so forth. So it's not just one benefit that the entitlement is there on.
Yes, sir. I understand your response and thing, but like for example, right? My mother received monthly pension from Social Security, you know. And to be honest, my mama count on a pension, you know, she depend on a pension, right? But like to be honest, you know, like if I never did wrong for help my mama, she couldn't survive off of that pension. And she gave a lot of years to the government, you know. And that what I never finished, you know, because that why I kinda wanna be heavily invested in the government, not to become a boss or so, all right? But like to reach a point where I could have their conversations with important people like you to try help out the majority of the people, which is actually poor in Belize, you know? Because the majority of the people are really poor people, you know? And I have one more question just before I slip my mind, you know? Will Social Security like start like putting a foot on doctors' necks that are giving individuals, because you can't really judge nobody and say somebody not sick, right? But they have some persons like we really abuse the system and just get sick paper right so, and when you really check on it that one heap of same diagnosis come along and the one doctor they go to.
You know, they are you brought up. All right. All right, everybody. Let's see if we could just refocus. All right. First of all, let me comment in respect to your your advice in terms of where your mom worked. That's a different discussion in terms of whatever benefits government or any employer may provide. For Social Security purposes, there are specific formulas involved as to based on contribution as to what you're entitled to. And as you move forward, you have to be aware of those. When you're thinking retirement planning, you have to understand what I can get from my Social Security scheme, from my employer, from my investments, from, there are different sources that you may get. And that's a discussion that we need to be having in the national setting. With respect to your latter point and the possibilities, if I may call it that way, where doctors are issuing sickness, are completing sickness claims with respect to persons who may not be genuinely sick, I come back to our whistleblower. If you feel like that is happening, feel free to log it in and send it to us. From where we are, we do track the numbers, the doctors, the frequencies, the type. We do track that. We do assess. We would look, and if we have a concern with any particular doctor, we may go and we will do our investigation. And also, when it comes to sickness, the employee will submit, go to the doctor and everything else. The employer still needs to verify. So it's not just the doctor. The employer still needs to verify that, yes, that person is employed, work for me, and out sick. I am not a doctor to say person is or is not sick. I get your point and I hear what you're saying, and I think it's been a concern for decades, right? But it does mean if you find that way, you want to submit it, we could look at it. We can't make the judgment call to tell people that they are or aren't sick. That is not our responsibility. Employers need to look at it when they come in and advise us that, yes, the person employed and person out sick. That's, there's only so much that we can do. We would hope that we have a society that moves towards just greater responsibility and individual accountability and be legitimate in what they do. Yes.
Earlier you spoke about on the website. Now you have up the one for retirement, where you can apply for retirement. Can you now do on that the life certificates?
That's a part of the features that is coming. So that's something that we're looking at as part of the enhancements. Okay. So yeah, it's on its way.
My second question, with the 1st of December coming on with your new they're encouraging everybody to go online, to do fully online. Have you guys reached out to the wider public service? Because up to now, I have been receiving some earful that there are some ministries, some departments that would send back their staff to the doctor to get the physical social security form rather than the one that you guys have now put on the portal. So have there been that wider discussion with the Ministry of Public Service, the Ministry of Finance, and other departments?
We have been engaging with a lot of ministries on a very consistent basis. And I would also say, though, if for whatever reason we've not hit your particular ministry, you're as an employer, you would like for a team to visit, or a team has no issues in coordinating and actually going on site, we've done that for various employers that have actually requested. But from our end, we've been actively out there, and that's why we did soft launch, we guide, it's been a process that we've gone through, and we feel like we've touched so many different areas that we're at a point that people have adopted and moving. Now we have to go fully. So we've done a lot of it. If we've not been able to reach yours for whatever reason, feel free to reach out to us, and we see how we can actually get that done. Any?
Yes, good evening. My name is Kenrick Ball. I'm a executive member of the Belize Police Association. I'm representing about 2,500 individuals being here. The gentleman said biologically he might be the youngest, but I believe I look the youngest. Right? I just want to clarify that before I start. But my question is, I don't know if it was mentioned before, right? But police officers, we have a duty 24 hours. And there's a policy that says that if a police officer doesn't respond to a situation, and if that is caught, for instance, in this social media day and age, everybody have phone. So if a off-duty police officer is in a situation and he or she doesn't respond, then we could be charged with what is called cowardice. That's a disciplinary measure for police. However, if we do respond and we are injured whilst not being on official police duty, social doesn't cover the police officer. So we have a dilemma there. We have multiple officers who, got injured whilst not on duty, but responding to a situation, and social don't cover them. So I'm asking today, on behalf of the 23 plus, 25 plus, or whatever amount of officers we have, is Social Security looking into fixing that? Because we cannot ask our officers not to respond. That's our job, that's our duty. But I mean, if social for the officers could make some type of, policy that says as a police officer, whilst not on official duty but responding to a situation, could still be covered.
Well, it is a wider discussion that perhaps need a bit more GOB commentary on it than Social Security may be prepared to look at, because the reality of the police officers is that the injury, the risk is higher. It is significantly different. So it is a conversation that we may wish to have at a higher level, and I think that's where it needs to start. It can't necessarily just start within our organization. It has to be looked at more nationally, perhaps as to what can be put in place to protect, to support our police officers, to appreciate the higher risk involved, and perhaps the higher inclination for injury while on the job. So I can't give you a clear cut as to this is what we would do. Anything we would do, it would need verification, it needs support. We would have to assess it to determine then what may be the impact then of actually making and providing that coverage. But it is a deeper discussion to be had. It has been mentioned to me before, so I have taken note of it.
Okay. And my next question, recent situation, a female police officer had a sick child, and she was unable to claim or to have the doctor fill out the form. I don't know if they don't ask it already, but I'm just trying to carry back the correct information. But is it possible that they no longer allow you to claim sick days on behalf of your child or your spouse? Or is it still on, or are they still allowed to do that?
That falls under the same family benefits that we need to look at. So that becomes a different legislation that we'd have to carve out and perhaps add as an additional benefit line.
Sorry, social doesn't honor it anymore, or it still honors it?
It was not honored any at all. It wasn't a part of what should have been covered.
Oh, sorry, I'm a bit confused because in our police manual, whilst I don't know if they had surrounded it with that in mind, but in our manual, it states that in order for us to be able to claim these days, we must present the Social Security form. Now, if that wasn't a practice, then I don't know where they got that from.
I think, unfortunately, it may be a discussion that we need to have outside, but I can't comment as to exactly the specifics of that. I see Ms. Callis have her hand up.
Okay.
One last question on my end. The young man brought up a very valid concern, and I believe this has been raised several times before regarding retirement age versus when you're able to connect your pension. I know there was recently actually a case at the CCG that also highlighted this regarding severance versus where pension was discussed. What is Social Security's position on that in terms when you look at legislative adjustment? Because if you're retiring in mandatory at 55, and I know it has to do with labor as well, but is Social Security, do they plan to have any engagement to have that alignment?
That's an interesting question. Globally, most Social Security schemes are actually thinking about increasing retirement age, which may not. No, I am just saying. I'm not saying we are looking at it. I am putting a disclaimer. I did not say we are looking at it. I am saying we've seen where most countries have actually increased retirement age to their Social Security program. There are differences in retirement age depending on employers, and that is an alignment that might need to be looked at more at the government side than the Social Security. For our purpose of benefit, it starts the earliest at age 60 for a retirement pension benefit.
Hi, good afternoon once again. As I listen to a number of the questions that you're responding to, I have to say I love your Polish responses, but I would coin some of those answers differently. First of all, I think that some of us need to understand that Social Security operate based on the act. And the only way you can make these changes is if we as employees or as unions lobby the government to make changes to the legislation, then you can enact some of what you're asking. My brother, with the situation at the police, I am saddened to hear that because in education, our teachers can apply for what you call an extended 25 days on to UPA, Urgent Private Affairs, so they can look after their husbands or children or whatever it is. And maybe as a member of the police association, you can lobby your superiors because I know you all operate differently. The commissioner makes the decision to fix that because that exists in education. The other thing that I want to comment on in this room, you might not expect this from a union leader, but I'll tell you this. There is one thing that as a school admin, I did not do. I did not give myself the power or the qualification of a medical practitioner. I refuse to waste time trying to determine if a person is ill or not. That's additional energy. For me, that is on the doctor, the patient, his or her disposition, and the good Lord. The legal documentation says he or she is medically unfit to carry out his or her responsibilities, and I work with that. Why am I saying that to the young man over there that just made that comment? That is the reason why we have so many workplace issues, because too many of us are trying to make comment or judgment, opinion on areas that is not our business. I just want to put it out point blank. And I say that to every employer in this room. So you made a comment when you said it is the employer's job to verify or say certain things. The employer is not a medical practitioner. So he or she just need to report what the paper is saying. I'm saying that as a union leader because of all the issues we're dealing with. Too many of us are trying to be medical practitioners. I remember being ill, and I remember being accused of not being ill, and I know exactly what it felt like. And because of that, when I became an admin, I operated differently. No, there are times I become suspicious, yes. And so I use a little godly thing on the individual. Don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you. So, but there are little, I just wanted to emphasize that. I don't want to take away the discussion and the point, just that we have to be careful when we decide, because I have a problem with the police to that right now. The police have to determine if you're sick before they can go a paper to go fill out. I didn't know when you go to PTA, you were taught how to assess illness. So I do have an issue with that, Mr. Police Association, man. Okay, thanks.
If I may comment to your first advice there, indeed, our responsibility is in the effective administration of the Social Security Act. Our limitations and benefits are based on that act, the guidelines. So when I say the retirement benefits starts at 60, it is guided by that, not by the Public Service Act or the Teaching Act or the Police Act or any other similar one, or the Private Pension Act. You know, it is guided by our legislation. And you're right, change can only happen if the legislators make those changes. We've identified, as I've highlighted, areas where amendments need to take. We recognize that, and we have to work towards getting consultation and advice as to how best to change that. And if I may comment as well to a couple of things that you mentioned, and I actually did not address to the lady at the back. The severance and benefits that an employer offer is different than what you may get from Social Security. And I encourage you to start to understand and know what those differences are, because your employer may provide something completely different and additional to Social Security, and you need to know that. You need to know that. All right? I think there's a question.
Hi, my name is Jade from Peacework Belize. I didn't have a question, but I just had a suggestion. I think that informing the public is really good, but we also have to keep in mind that there is a lot of Spanish speakers, particularly from the amnesty program. There are a lot of individuals that are becoming permanent residents, and these people need to be informed, and most of them speak Spanish. You know, they come from other Central American countries, and I don't think we have to leave them aside or just think that, okay, we give them a brochure, a handout, or we put an ad and it's in English. You know, I think it would be really good to cater to them as well, particularly when they are just like kind of integrating themselves into what should be the regulations, and part of it should be Social Security. They need to know what are their benefits, how does the contributions work, and if you are planning to implementing all of these new things, that would be good as well.
I will be mindful to remind that our legislation, our country is built in the English, so we must start there first and foremost. Whether we develop options that give for Spanish or French or Mandarin or any other language is secondary to us. We must develop within the English language first and foremost. I think that's the extent of the question. I don't know if we have another poll, Vanessa. And we do want your feedback. We do have another poll that we want to pull up on the screen. I will hand over the microphone to Ms. Fayos. But thank you all, appreciate it.
Thank you, CEO. And thank you, our valued stakeholders, for such an interactive Q&A segment. So we do have 2 more poll questions that we'd like to ask, very important. This one, I see that some of you have already scanned the QR code. If you have not, please participate. Let us hear what you're thinking. The question is, where do you think the ceiling should be at this time? So the options, $600, $1,000 or $800. We're referring to the contribution ceiling, okay? And we know that over 50 people are in this room, so we're looking to see at least 50 persons responding and more. All right, thanks. All right, so in terms of the context for this question, also bear in mind that the current ceiling is at $520, okay? So that's where it is right now. If you check the contribution table on the website, I see 59%. Okay, it said 59% was indicating $600. I'm still giving some of you a chance to participate if you haven't participated yet and voted, so that we know what you think as it relates to this question. All right, so we're at 54%, so we'll lock it off at this point for this particular question. So in terms of the room and the vote, 54% who have answered, or 55% is saying that we should increase that contribution ceiling to $600. So thank you for participating. And we have one more poll question that we'd like to ask. And I'd ask you again if you can please scan the QR code when it shows up again. So shortly, the third question, yes, here it is. Very simple and easy question to answer, either a yes or a no answer. The question is, the self-employed is currently voluntary. Do you think it should be mandatory? Yes or no? Okay, so the results of that particular poll question is 62% saying yes, that we should make it mandatory. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to encourage you to participate and scan one more QR code, and that would be related to filling out the feedback survey. We did do a survey at the last consultation we had in November of last year. And we actually read through those answers, and they did inform some parts of the planning process for today's consultation. And so it's important for us to keep doing these feedback surveys so that we can keep current with what is the sentiment today from our stakeholders. I'd also like to inform you that we do have fruits, coffee, water, and juice at the back. And when we are done, I do encourage you not to rush off and go home, but to hang about a little bit, and you can use some of that time to network, meet with us one-on-one if you so desire. Yes, so, and then also too, we do have some copies of the 2023 annual report at the back. If you'd like a copy, you can just, before you leave, you can go to the back where we have them on display. Okay. All right, so with that said, I think we've come to the end of our session for today. As we conclude, I want to extend our sincere appreciation to each of you for your time, your presence, and your active participation. Your insights, your questions, and your perspectives are invaluable to us. They help strengthen the Social Security Fund and ensure that the decisions we make reflect the realities and expectations of the people we serve. Today is just one step in an ongoing conversation. We are committed to continued dialogue as we are pleased to share that our next rounds of consultations will be in February and March of next year. We look forward to welcome you again at those events that we will be having. And I just want to say once again, thank you so much for coming out and participating in today's stakeholder consultation. We really appreciate it, and you are very valuable to us. Thank you.